Hi, everyone. I want to chat about a few things because I think they can make a big difference. So, firstly, the nature of our group is not about um, giving you models which are true or information which is true or um, anything like that. It's all about exploration and inquiry and finding the truth in yourself. So the truth is that place where you have a direct connection and something transforms. The truth does not result in a statement that is unequivocal and an endpoint that is a final fact. There is no such truth. Everything is relative. So, if we are attached to what we believe is true, then we are taking a position which is usually engaged in a role or an identity, and we're creating conflict, firstly in ourself, and secondly in our relationship. That's what we'd call the messy relationship. So the endeavor here is to relate as a sovereign being connected to truth. Yeah, truth being a place, kind of a place of no place, or a connection to the absolute. It's another way of saying it. Connection to your heart, as best you can, is another way of saying it. So it's not a finite process, it's a practice. And as we practice it, we become more skilled at showing up in truth and speaking from truth and listening from truth. So what's important here is that if I share something and you just say, oh, I like everything Leonora says and I believe what she says, and I'm now attaching to what she says, and I'm going to take a position that what she says is true, the first thing that's a problem there is that you may have misunderstood what I've said because you're listening through a filter and you're not aware of the filter that you're listening through. And secondly, that is just, adding another layer of dead information, dead being an attachment to an idea about truth. And there's no investigation. What is relevant here is not who's right and who's wrong, because that's a polarity. What is relevant is the process of exploration that's inspired from what I say. So as an example, if you agree with what I say, you are not having courage, you are to journey experientially, or you're not, maybe it's not courage, maybe that's not the right word, but you're not taking the endeavor of finding out for yourself, does it resonate? So what I'm saying is really more about inspiring you to, and empowering you to find out for yourself how you respond to what I'm saying. So if you're not listening right now through your felt sense, that's the first step. Let's connect and feel energetically and make that a habit and a way of listening. And the dyad work is really to support listening through the felt sense, and doing it while you're engaged with others is a practice. Secondly, so, that's a kind of blindness to something that sounds good outside, or somebody that you've already given your respect to is now kind of like somebody who knows and you believe what they say. Well, this is not a good idea, because we're all human. And firstly, what I say may not serve you. And secondly, what I say may be misunderstood. So don't take on what I say because it's me. And secondly, if you disagree with what I say, what's relevant is the exploration of how I triggered you. So it's like if some part of you goes, no, that's not correct, I don't agree with what you say. It's like, what does it make you feel inside. And who is the I who has a position based on, what you know, what you believe, let's say, not what you know, but what you believe. So there's not really a need for an argument, if you will, about right and wrong. It's really an exploration of how you feel and what is true. And so there's a line, or actually there isn't a line between, truth and how you are living your life. There's always a possibility for moving out of that sort of position which is created from trauma, out of the identification with what you know and how you perceive, to living as a living, dynamic, unique expression, birthing in each moment out of truth, out of divinity. And that is what this work is about. That is what we're doing. So if you're not having that experience, that's fine. The task is about integrating and unifying. So if you're feeling separate from me, or angry, or if you're feeling that you have a position that you're attached to, then if you notice that, that's all you have to do. Is firstly, you have to notice that. You can't notice that from a mental place. You notice that from a felt sense place. And once you notice that, you have just opened a door to an exploration. And that exploration is facilitated by sovereignty, by really fully landing in the experience of what's arising in you. So what's arising in you, some of it you will be seeing and some of it will be hidden, and it's a practice and a process of unwinding to find those parts. So, noticing resistance is the beginning step to working with identity, noticing, parts that are feeling separate, noticing if you feel embodied, or noticing if there's a looker. All these things are part of the way of resolving what's causing suffering in your own system, is separation, and is a way of removing that separation, of becoming unified with, the parts that you resist or you don't even like about yourself. Is like falling in love with them, is forgiving, is understanding, is compassion. And it's not a mental thing to do that. It's a process of discovery, a willingness to die, in fact, to open to the experience that's happening, and then to invite stillness, which is the doorway to truth, to meet those parts of yourself, to enable that unification. So we're not integrating to an upgraded position that has a better view. We're integrating to life, to the dynamism of not knowing, to the humbleness and vulnerability of living and not knowing, and living from the present moment without a past or a need for a future. So this is not a weekend program, it's a life program that we're all on. So, there's truth, which is a singularity, that unique expression of truth. And then there's relativity, and that's about the dualistic way of living, subject, object, me and other, separation, relativity. I made a few notes. So I just want to, because some folks are quite new and maybe just beginning with things like reflection technique and Even if you're not new, it's always nice to review what reflection technique is about. And I have a new way that I might not have mentioned before that you can use it. So reflection technique is to enable you to notice something that you feel separate from, could be another person, or something that you're reacting to, which could be another person, could be the weather, it could be a rotten banana. It really doesn't matter. That anything that you hold as separate from you is creating a reaction. So even a rotten banana has power potentially to upset you if you wanted a nice banana for your breakfast. So in that, you are separate from the banana and thus reacting to it. And you may work with the banana until it, or the weather, or the other person, whatever you're working with, until the gap gets smaller and smaller. And what's in the gap between you and how you and where you perceive your object that you're reflecting on is the subconscious material. So, you can do reflection technique on the same topic many times, and it will shift things. So it's not like, oh, I did reflection technique and I'm done. It's an ongoing possibility of discovery. Don't expect to be done, but do expect to shift and learn. So when you're doing reflection technique, what you're actually doing is you're sitting in yourself, noticing how that object, that person, that situation, that event, that banana, whatever it is, creates energy within you, your reaction, and you're feeling your reaction. So this is like a big first step, is feeling the experience that's created is like paramount. It's number one. And as you feel your reactivity, it will transform potentially, but it might not completely go away. The reason it doesn't completely go away is because there's an identity or a resistor or an observer. Those are all pointing to the same filter that you see through. That's entangled with what you're looking at, the experience now in your body. At least it's not the banana out there. It's now your experience within the body. So there is a dualistic relationship with experience. The experience that you're having, if you're willing to have it, may completely clear. If there's a part of you that's not, before I say that, when I say completely clear, it returns to light. It returns to the true self, which you will feel as an expression of lightness or expansion. Lightness and expansion is a good way, or peace is a good way to describe a kind of endpoint of healing on that topic. So if it hasn't turned to light, the reason it hasn't turned to light is that there's a projector, an identity, a resistor. There's a sense of I, and that sense of I is maintaining you. It's exhausting, but it's looking through a filter, and that filter is innately resistant to change. The identities don't want to change because they're entangled with safety, maintaining safety, protecting you, coping with life. So, the deeper level of reflection technique is identity work. And what we start to recognize when we do identity work is that we are creating what we're looking at in some way. It has its uniqueness itself. The rotten banana is a rotten banana, no question. But our dynamic relationship with it is being created by our identity, our observer, our resistance to it. You know, like if we had no resistance, we'd just go and go, that's rotten, chuck it in the compost, and let's have an apple for breakfast instead, you know, or whatever. You would, the end point of healing is a flow into another choice or another dynamic. It's like a let go of the banana, choose the apple. It's all like an automatic, easeful process. It might be easy with the rotten banana, but it might not be so easy with the important people in your life. So it's nice to have a rotten banana example to see how easy it can be to flow. I want to talk about this identity thing because that's the projector that's entangled with the experience and also in a way creating the experience from that entanglement, which is unconscious. So here's an example, because that's a lot for your head. I'm hoping that you're in your felt sense anyway. If you had an experience that happened in the past where you had a shock and you were afraid and you ran away, yeah, then, and that was in a dark alley, you are now probably avoiding dark alleys, which is probably a good idea. However, what is happening is that the fear that is now, that you, when you had that experience, you got overwhelmed because the fear was too much, and you got overwhelmed and you split off, and now you have an identity who is engaged in making sure that you don't walk down any dark alleys, and is living in a belief that all dark alleys are dangerous. So all you got to do is see a dark alley and, you know, you will avoid it, even though there might be some gold at the end of that alley. It's like there's a distance between you and the alley. You've already made up your mind that that alley is dangerous. And the reason that that is maintained is because the fear that happened in the past is still hidden in your memory, in the felt sense. You can't see it potentially, firstly because you're not near a dark alley, and secondly because you've split off and you've separated from the somatic experience that lives in the felt sense of your body. So you have a relationship now which is separate from yourself. Forget the dark alley. You are living in a situation where you are separate from yourself. Now, should you encounter a dark alley, you will likely avoid it. There's value in that. However, you know, you start seeing dark alleys everywhere you go, because the fear that's inside you is generally assuming that there's a danger outside you. That's what fear, living unconscious fear, is doing. You can see it in the collective right now with the COVID and the masks and the dramas, yes? You can see it out there if you can't see it in here. So the fear inside you is kind of entangled with your whole world, and it's going to start seeing dark alleys everywhere. And even an alley that has dappled sunlight may be too dark for you. And so the fear becomes stronger and the container becomes more rigid about maintaining separation from the dark alley. But it's a little bit like when you fall off a horse, you have to get back on. So you don't have to go find a dark alley and walk down it, but you have to visit, firstly, the fear that's living inside you. You may not even be able to find it, yeah, because you're split from it. You're up there in the head with all the barriers that have been built against your dark alleys, so that you're not even aware of the fear that lives within you until something or someone triggers it, which is why being triggered is a doorway, which being triggered is a gift. And that gift enables the fear to arise, you know, the trigger, the anger, the fear, the emotions, which you've split off from, arise from the triggers. So use the triggers wisely as opportunities to firstly feel the fear or the anger or whatever's going on in reflection to your dark alley or the trigger. And then notice the sense of I, because that's the thing that's assembled a structure which is projecting danger. It's looking at the world, or it's looking at dark alleys, and it's finding that them to be dangerous. Without further investigation, that dark alley is not necessarily dangerous. Yeah, the one that you had an experience with in the past is creating that new view, the current view of this dark alley as dangerous, where it might have a shaft of light, a bottle of champagne, a big diamond, and a whole bunch of other jewels when you have the courage to go down it. So that may not be one process, that may be an iterative cycling toward that gold, through your fear. So the other piece I wanted to say about this, just looking at my notes, I don't usually make notes, but is that is going on inside you. Your head is looking at experiences that it may be partially creating. Yeah, you wouldn't consciously create pain in the body. You may see all sorts of things that aren't there. Now, when I work with people, they often are having experiences that I don't see. And that gives me an indication that they're seeing through a filter and projecting that experience onto the body. Now, how do I know that? 30 years of journeying and checking out every angle and exploring very deeply and knowing and trusting, you know, like in the beginning, I didn't trust myself. I used to believe people. And then I learned to trust myself. It took some time. But whether I'm right or wrong is somewhat irrelevant. Is like when I notice that somebody's noticing an experience in the body that I can't perceive, I choose to investigate that as if they are creating it from a mental structure. They're projecting that experience onto the body. They're looking for something and they're finding it. And that's an unconscious process. So this reflection technique that we do with things outside us, we can also do between the mind and the belly. Yeah. So you can, with your normal place of perception, which is usually likely up here, you can look at your belly or look at something in your body and notice how I feel when I look at that. So whether it's inside me or outside me, I can still do reflection technique. So that was the first thing. The second thing is if you have a lot of thoughts and you're having trouble landing, I want to invite you to put the thought and the thinker outside. It makes it easier to do reflection technique. So, for example, if your thought might be a kind of repetitive thing, it has an energy, thought has energy. Let's say that your thought is, I'm not doing it right, or this isn't working, or, you know, it's basically doubt. Yeah. So you might not notice that, but the thoughts will just keep cycling through, and they may change the words a bit, but the flavor and the energy will just keep cycling through and through and through until you can integrate the thought and the thinker. And it can be difficult when we're identified with the thought, with the thinker and the thought. It's difficult to disidentify. So what I found valuable is that if you put that thought and thinker outside you, I mean, it's quite likely that those original thoughts came from a parent anyway. But whether you want to put it in, if it reminds you of your dad or somebody else, fine, you can stick your dad out there and listen to him saying those things to you. Or you can just put your thinker outside, like put him in a little bubble, like a cartoon bubble, and listen to the thought that he says, and notice how your system responds to hearing that thought. You're not doing this right. Say that's the thought. Okay. Someone outside is saying that to you. How do you feel inside? And that will help you get out of the cycle of thinking and get connected to the experience that the thought is creating. So if you never find that experience, you just stay in the thinker. And if you don't eventually integrate the thinker, you know, the process isn't complete. So the thinker is actually creating an experience which you may not be willing to feel because you're just spinning in the head. So if you put him outside and listen with the body, that might help you feel. Yeah. And then you can do reflection technique, which is what you're doing with the thinker, but you've externalized him or her. So you might try that if you have a busy mind. Eventually it just becomes innate and automatic, like all these processes kind of upgrade your nervous system so that they cease to be processes and they become innate and automatic, and that results in heart-centered sovereignty. Okay, that's all I want to say for today. So I hope you find some jewels in there. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.